Okay, so next up, we have Jan from Pixamundo. Jan Heinz. He's the COO of Asia VFX executive producer. And Jan, take it away.
Sure. Thank you. Oh, that's... Hmm. That's great. All right. So, in the 10 years I've been working in China, there's this one movie that keeps following me, and it's just like a curse. This movie is Avatar. I haven't worked on Avatar at all, so that's the problem firstly. This movie is coming up again and again and again until just, I think last week, when a client freaked out on me because my team didn't understand or didn't want to understand that the reference they actually wanted to have and how the movie was supposed to look like was Avatar. My name is Jan Heinze. I work for a company called Pixamundo, while my colleagues in the US and in Europe are mostly working for big Hollywood studios, OTT platforms, the established developers. We are serving the market here in China, and I'm still excited about it. What makes me excited about China is that we're in this kind of like, of course, in an industry that doesn't have rules yet, right? So we find ourselves in this strangely unique position where we can actually try to help the independent producers of films to find partners like in themed entertainment or in advertisement to actually start working together. But the question is, of course, why is Avatar so successful in China? Why people still care about it 10 years after the release? Why is it so powerful? I think when it was released 10 years ago, it was a technical novelty, right? It was like one of the first movies that again used 3D technology and technology that was much better than the one before. James Cameron developed tons of new technologies like facial capturing and so on for like really cool CG creatures. So technically speaking, yes, it was a masterpiece. And I do believe that the audience actually appreciated that. Friends told their friends to definitely watch it in the cinema, and that of course helped to create like a massive box office. But I don't think that explains why this movie is still used as a reference today. There have been movies that are much more complicated, that in my opinion look better, and that use much more state-of-the-art technology. What I believe is the reason why Avatar is still used as a reference is that it is, in the end, a world. It's an entire universe that appeals to fundamental human desires. So the question is, of course, can we replicate the success without copying it? And a problem that we have in all these meetings when the client is coming with like, hey, have you seen Avatar? We actually want something like this, is that they reduce it to the look, right? So it turns out that just by adding a couple of these glowy things to any concept you do, you have a much higher chance to sell, right? Kind of depressing as a designer. But I mean, the movie looks fantastic. I mean, there's no question that that was also a landmark in terms of like look development, production design, and so on. So there's no question about that. I think the real reason why it works so great is actually that it's a movie about immersion, right? It's about ultimately Avatar story itself gives us this feeling of like we're going through an avatar into the story, into like a different body. We experience a world. So it's basically a story about immersion itself. So in the end, we totally buy into this world. In the end, while we watch the movie or while we are going for the fly attraction in Orlando, we create our own little avatar story. And I believe that that's actually what makes it so successful. Humans define themselves through stories. They tell each other around a campfire, or maybe nowadays more on social media, right? And finding these stories that appeal to masses is unfortunately much more an art than science. So no matter if you work on feature films, on VR movies, or on themed attractions, stories help us to spark excitement in the audience. I think what they actually do is they help the audience to care about what they see. Of course, Avatar is not the only IP that has great potential for like immersive storytelling or to be used like in immersive media. I'm, for instance, a big fanboy of Game of Thrones, and that's not just because we worked on these dragons for like 7 years now. I think Game of Thrones developed a world that is even more complex and potentially more immersive than Avatar. There are like different parties you could join. There's like this fairy tale part, but also the horror part. You can join the good side or the bad side, whatever side you want to rule for. And of course, everyone wants to have a dragon, right? And I believe that would be a fantastic attraction as well, to fly with it or to experience what it means to actually own a little dragon. And they grew up quite a bit over the years. Don't fit them in the closet anymore. Yeah. When we started, they were like this. Fly one soon. And of course, I mean, I love showing Game of Thrones to my clients in China because I believe that it's, first of all, if you think about the budget, about production value, this is something we can actually achieve with budgets we have here in China. I'm not talking about Disney, I'm not talking about Universal, I'm talking about local productions. So there's so much more in China, and China is so rich of stories, it's so rich of culture that could be used for that. And of course, there are like the Chinese classics, like Fengshan, or there's the Journey to the West, and they're incredibly rich worlds. They're probably much more detailed and much more worked out than Avatar itself. And I think everyone in China has immersed themselves as a child into one of these characters. And that might also be the problem with these IPs. Expectations are incredible. Once you touch one of those, you have to do it right, and you cannot change much, right? There's like a set rule of how the Monkey King looks like, how Fengshan looks like, and there are like big expectations on that. So I think to invest in public domain content as a developer and so on with such high expectations might be quite a risk. But fortunately, and this is what we're trying to help our clients in China, is like there's so many other cool content, right? There's cool content coming from game companies, like here Gujian. There are movies and TV shows and novels like Ghost Blow Out the Candles that are basically like Tomb Raider, right? They're like really cool stories that you could work towards more. And then there are animated features like Koba, and they're all like incredibly original and incredibly detailed as their worlds. We worked just most recently on a film called The Wandering Earth, what was like a big box office hit, was a big surprise because no one thought that sci-fi can be done in China. And I think that was the first time that it worked. And it actually started a whole, like a whole new wave of productions where people are actually brave enough to invest in sci-fi content. And I hope that some of them maybe think while they're developing the content about different revenue streams, right? About themed entertainment, about like VR experiences and so on. Because unfortunately, that's something that is usually not happening in China yet. So immersive media itself is of course best equipped for like immersive storytelling. What we saw is that what we have to do is like when we create like all kind of attraction, and especially when they're not classically story based, is that we can apply these rules to pretty much everything that we do. We can apply storytelling to create better immersion. We learned, for instance, a lot on a project we finished last year for National Geographic's Encounter the Ocean Odyssey in New York Times Square. So the purpose of this project, it's a digital aquarium, And of course, the purpose is mostly educational. It's conservatory. We're trying to educate kids and we're trying to educate people about the ocean, right? We're trying to make them protect it. But in the end, what I believe is that we have the same goal that James Cameron had when he created Avatar. What we want to do is we want to make people care about the protagonist they meet here. So there's, for instance, one of the shows there is a reef scene. It's a very simple story. It's just like a dolphin mother that takes care of her baby. Reef sharks attacking, right? I don't want to spoil the end of the story. It's gonna be fine, but I think it's these little stories that right now happen everywhere around the planet, right? These are these stories that are just part of our normal life, but that you will never experience as a normal audience, right? Even if you're a diver, it's very unlikely that you're going to see this scene. So that's what we started to call curated experiences, where we try to bring these little stories from the world into a place and let people experience them. Another piece of this example is this sea lion. It's like an interactive sea lion that has, we call it an AI. Of course, it's on the way to AI, right? It's a bit of a buzzword. But it's really incredible that what is a smaller exhibit there is it's so successful. We had one on our booth here at IEPA, and I think it's mostly grown-ups who go there and start interacting. They try to touch it, and they see that this sea lion is not like a typical puppet, right? It's not one of these AR games where you do this and he does this, right? It has a character, it has a personality, and I think because of that, you start to relate, you start to care. And if we start caring about something, then we can start telling a story. And then from the moment that you encounter with a creature like this, your imagination can take off. So technology can help us as creators to develop better worlds, and stories will ultimately lead to better audience immersion. People often consider us as a visual effects company as the tech guys. So here are a couple of technologies that we use to create better stories or help our clients to create better stories. One is what we call broadly visualization. So visualization comes in all kinds of flavors. Some people call them pre-viz, it's post-viz, there's tech-viz, there are all kinds of vizes. In the end, what it is, it's like a very iterative way of exploring a story, of exploring how a story can unfold and work. What I think is the cool thing about pre-viz is that it's fast. So what we can do is we stopped using storyboards when we communicate with our clients, with directors or developers. We go straight into 3D. 3D doesn't lie, right? If you draw a storyboard, you never know if its perspective is right, if it actually shows the space as it is. But we can also bend reality, so that's not a problem. What is really cool about pre-viz is that everything you throw away. So it's like clients often come and say, oh, do this pre-viz, and they expect the first version to work. And the one thing we explain is that, no, it's about the first 50 versions that we throw away. Because as I mentioned before, storytelling is not science, right? We don't know exactly how it's going to unfold. We have to try, we have to iterate, we have to actually learn what works and what doesn't work. And this is a fantastic tool to do that. These are all examples from movies like 2012 or Star Trek and so on, where it's heavily used as a blueprint for the movie. But in the end, the interesting part is what you don't see there, right? It's all the versions that we throw away on the way. And what is developing really rapidly right now is of course, real-time technology. So we have integrated game engines like Unity or Unreal into our pipeline for all kinds of steps. It's actually the National Geographic projects, we ran into some trouble with 8K projections with I think 48 frames per second. You couldn't even render these frames anymore. It's it took 24 hours for one frame to come out of the computer, and actually we could solve the problem with new technologies, right? But that's just one thing. I think, again, moving this technology into the creative process is where it is really magical. Previous used to look like blocking, like gray blocks and so on. Now, we just put asset libraries in there from a game engine and everything starts to look like almost a final product. And I think that's incredibly powerful. So this is, for instance, like an example where we produced a final shot for Star Trek Discovery in Unreal, basically, and you see how interactive this is. This is just playing in real time. You know, these shots would have taken days and days on hundreds of machines to deliver. But again, it's mostly about iterating. It's mostly about like just realizing that one version is not good enough, go to the next version and do it again. And where it gets really interesting is like when you combine both technologies. Right? It's like, I mean, I'm talking right now not how you use interactive technology to have a C line or so. This is really about the creative process. I think what is incredible is like if you can start to see your experience, to see an attraction, like basically in real time, start discussing it. Use VR, use other collaborative technologies to actually work together with artists and experience the space. You can use the previous, all the assets that you're building in the process, bring everything together, and step by step, we create we work towards a final product. And that's for us not just about the media, but it's collaborating with others about architecture, about all the elements, the theming that we can bring into this, and help you to actually visualize a complete attraction and how it will feel like through VR, for instance.
So, one last time, could you actually turn around the other side? Let's see this scene from the back. Fantastic. I think we got a little more bump detail.
Yeah. So, ultimately, our goal is always to immerse our audience in worlds, in stories with rich characters they can identify with and care about. Technology can help us doing this. But in the end, it's only story that counts. It's only story that actually makes people care, makes people relate. So if you're a media creator and you're next time asked by a client to please do avatar, maybe think twice. Maybe it's not really the reason. Maybe what they expect from you is that you think a little bit harder and actually do it as good as avatar, right? That you really invest your time in like developing a strong character, strong worlds, and so on. And if that all fails, just add some of these glowing, floating things, and it's all solved. Thank you so much.